So we're starting here with nice long hair. We're gonna go in and do a little bit of framing around this just to break it up a little bit and add some depth around her face. So the first thing we wanna do is check out her hairline, see what she has going on in that area. So we're pulling all the hair back, getting it off of her face, seeing how it kind of lives and how it falls. What's the growth pattern and where is it thickest, where is it thinnest? Typically there's going to be a lot of hair at the top of the head and a little less hair around the sides. For Amelia's hairline, she has a typical recession area and she doesn't have any baby hairs or anything here, but we do want to take into consideration that there is a recession there. So when this hair is coming forward, where is it coming from on her head so that we don't create a gap as we're cutting? This area is a bit thinner here, as is normal. And then the other thing we want to take into consideration is once we create our basic sections, how much density do we have from roots to ends? Her hair is processed, but in really good condition, and she's been using our Restore line, so it's nice and healthy, it's super shiny. We're gonna do a little section here just to get started. So we want to create a nice soft face frame for her, nothing super intense, but we are going for a kind of bombshell 90s type of look, so there is going to be a noticeable frame to it. So let's just comb this down and see what kind of density we have here and see how the hair lives. Most of this does grow forward, so you can kind of comb it, see how it bounces back up, and then that's going to also be important to look at. So this hair, even though we combed it forward, kind of jumps back this direction. So we should keep that in mind, that we might want a little extra length in this area because it'll probably separate and pull itself back a bit. Through the front, we knew we were going to have the most density there. But what's happening where that recession area is, because there's not as much hair there, because the hairline doesn't go straight across, it comes back right there. There is a little bit of a hole in terms of density. So that's going to be important when we create this nice face frame line, that I don't want to create more of a gap there, more of a hole. So it's good to just see how short, how steep of an angle we need to create, and then what's going to maybe move out of the way or open up in that area. So I want to start with looking straight ahead and then figuring out where I want this shortest piece to go. I like this teeny tiny little piece that we're going to start with. And the reason I start with such a small piece is because it allows you to move it around. It won't chunk up or get really bulky and heavy in that area. And it gives you the freedom to create a nice soft line without it being really bulky or bold. So we're just going to look at her face shape. She has more of a heart-shaped face, so she can wear it a little shorter. She could also wear super long, and that would be very flattering on her as well. I think I want to bring it up just a touch so that there's some fun stuff that's a little shorter for her. And then once we go in and carve open this area more, it'll feel like there's a lot more face framing. But we're starting in this thin diagonal back section. It's about an inch and a half back. And this allows us to create a nice line all the way through, so that if I were to come straight down, you would only be picking up this section. That's why the diagonal back is nice. So we'll comb this again forward. Start with this small section. Comb it straight ahead. And then I'm gonna take this piece and I'm gonna decide where I wanna carve it. So we decided right around here. I'm gonna lift it as I cut. And that's gonna create a little bit of a point on it and also allow freedom of movement and help break up a cowlick here as well by carving from beneath. So I'm gonna use that as my jumping off point. You can see that there's already some disconnect, so we wanna follow that through and connect. And with all of these pieces that are really close to her face, I wanna do super soft pieces that will fall and flatter really nicely. With the stuff down here, I wanna bulk it up a little bit because there is a little less density on her ends. So I'm gonna cut this area a little bit differently, and I'll show you that a bit later. So this next section, I'm gonna use this guide that we just cut, and here. And I want it to open up away from her face, so that pops out. And then I'm just gently carving that off. You can see it kind of starting to form now. Same thing there. And we want this to be soft and gradual as it gets longer. And you'll notice I'm not using a comb too much because I really want to see where her hair separates itself. So I want to connect this point to this point. I'm going to bring it towards, and then as I cut away from her face so that the longer point extends outward. The smaller the section you take, the more delicate your framing is going to be. The larger the section you take, the more bulky it's going to be. So depends on the look you're going for. Right around this jawline area for her face shape, I do want it to be very delicate. So we're going to take those smaller pieces as we move around that area. And then, like I said, once we get down here, I'll do a different type of hair cutting technique, and that will add the bulk that I'm looking for in those areas. So you can see that exactly what we thought was going to happen is happening here. So this area, now that it's dried a little bit, is pushing itself more backwards instead of forward. The hair grows a little bit down and back, and then it's opening up this hole here in this area where her recession is. It's not that she doesn't have nice dense hair, it's just that because of the way her hairline is shaped, it creates a hole when you comb the hair all down. And since we want to create a nice straight line, some of this is going to be optical illusion. It doesn't have to be exactly perfectly even, it just needs to look even for her. So I'm going to take this forward, and then we're going to carve this back. And you can see that's forming nicely already. Same thing here. So we're connecting this. I want to use larger sections here. There's not quite as much density. And I need it to still, I need to cut it still, I need it to do something. And then I'm just refining these pieces a little bit here and there. So picking up things that my eyes catches that need adjustment. Okay, so I feel really good about that. This is looking really nice and soft. And now that I'm getting to this area, this is the part where I'm gonna cut a little differently because I wanna bulk it up and make it a bolder part of the haircut. So I'm gonna over direct this forward so that I can preserve as much length at this point of her ear. This is the length in the front of her hair. So it's important to preserve that. Otherwise, if we're cutting it all off, it's gonna look really short in the front and all of her length will primarily be in the back of her hair. So she does have a lot of hair back here, but we wanna make sure she still has a lot of hair up here as well. And we want the front and the back to be one cohesive haircut and not feel like they're two separate things going on. So I'm over directing this. And this is my point that I cut last. This is what, from this point to this point is what I want to cut. I'm just going to simply slide this off. So there's a little bit of that gap here. I'm gonna take up this really fine section and just marry those sections together. Same thing here, just mirroring what we did in this area to what's happening down here. Taking any little corners off, just so that even though it's bulking up, it still feels delicate around her face. And again, just coming back gently. Pretty. So, I'm gonna take my next section here and basically do the same thing, but let's see how this plays out. Let's see what happens once we comb it and how the hair is reacting. Pulling it forward, seeing where it lives. So you can see that this area is hanging on top of what we cut, and then we're creating some more density in this part where the recession is, and down through the bottom. This is really the only piece here that I want to make sure it's nice and super delicate. So I'm going to find that piece, pull it over directed towards the middle so I can preserve some length on it and create a nice short to long. I'm going to take it a little shorter. That's looking really pretty. Let's see what this area is doing. This is all detail work now. Once you start your basis, you can do your detail work to refine and adjust everything. I want to start connecting these two sections, so that's why I picked it all up in one big section. And again, we're over directing, and then this is really just like a slide cut. Little cuts at the hair, not actually sliding the shears, but moving in a downward direction and following through with as you cut. And then same thing in this bottom area. We want to bulk that up a little bit, so making sure that corner comes off. It's looking a little long right there, so we'll take that section, pick it back up, and do the same thing. Find where it's not connecting. It's pretty much this particular point. So I'm going to start cutting there and work my way down. That was really all I needed. Take another diagonal back section, and it's basically from about the mask point of the ear, and the sections are becoming to the top of your head. For Amelia's hair, she parts her hair in the middle, she parts it on the side, she kind of moves it around. So I'm going off of that middle part because that's how I want the haircut to lay, but also because that's what she walked in with today, and I think that that's a nice flattering parting on her. If someone was parting really far on the side or at a diagonal or something like that, you always want to do your face frame based on where they're going to wear their hair. That way, when you're cutting it, you're not accidentally cutting a really intense side bang or something like that that they might not want once they flip it to the side where they actually let it live. So it's really important to have that conversation with your client and find out, what do they do with their hair? We're pulling this back down and seeing what we want to create here. So this is really thin right there. That corner needs to come off, as well as all of this excess hair right here. So I'm going to start doing more slide cutting here. I don't need to do as much of that delicate stuff. That's just the nice stuff that goes right next to her face. And everything else I want it to be big and bold. And you can always go back and put more on. You just can't, you can't put it back on. You can always cut more off. So it's important to take small sections and make sure you're not cutting anything too short along the way. And the little cuts that I'm doing allow the hair to look really nice and soft still, even though the slide cutting allows it to be bolder. So here's that disconnect, and we just want to go in and connect that. Preserve that length though, make sure you over direct it back. And the more bold, the more noticeable you want this to be, the less over directing and moving and all of that you need to do. It really depends on the shape that you're trying to make. So you just want to keep that in mind. At the end of the day, how do you want the haircut to look? How do you want it to live? How is it going to best sit on their face? And I want something that's going to have a big impact, but not be too much work for styling, and that will allow all the super long length that she has back here to still stay connected to the front. Same small diagonal back section, and making sure to get all that other hair out of the way. Now when you're doing the opposite side, it's important to stand in a way where you can create the same angles that you created on the other side. So that's including how you hold your fingers as well as how you hold your shears. Let's put in that small delicate piece in the front right away. I'm gonna take this other little triangle of hair right there, find my previous one, and just see where it needs to go. So you can see this is the longest point, and this one starts about right there. Over direct and trim it off. We did this area up, so I'm actually going to go up with it. Perfect. And then the rest of these smaller sections are going to come out away from her face, and that will allow it to open up around her face. Just kind of check to make sure things are even along the way. And the reason, again, that I'm doing this right next to her face is because this is where it's important that it's, because this is sitting directly on her face, it's really important, especially if you're cutting something shorter, to make sure that it's nice and soft, super flattering, not laying in a weird way or chunking up or anything like that. So that's why we're doing this carving technique. This is carve for shape. Let's see, let's check that other side. So finding the outer edge of the triangle and about where that one would be over here as well. Look at that, it's perfect. That's probably what you like to hear while I'm cutting your hair. All right, so we're continuing that on, over direct, and just a little carve for shape. All right, we're getting to this recession point. We want to connect that into this bolder area, so do a little connecting, make sure it's soft. And let's go ahead and slide cut this from this point out. The more vertical your shears are pointed, the softer your angle will be. If they're straight up and down, you're barely going to cut anything off. If they are more horizontal, you're going to create a heavy line. So with this, because I want it to be nice and soft right next to her face, they're almost 100% vertical. Let's do our next diagonal back section and see if this side does anything different from the other side. Sometimes people also have different amounts of hair or cowlicks or any number of things going on from one side to the other. So it is important to treat each side differently and give each side the same amount of consideration rather than just going on autopilot and cutting it exactly the same. And for this, we're using a guide from Beneath. So this looks a bit long. We'll cut that to match the guide Beneath. And same thing here. And we're in that bulkier part of her hair, so that's why we're taking these teeny tiny sections. This approach of carving is also going to give it a more natural feel to the haircut. That way it just looks a little bit more effortless for her. All right, I'm going to go through and connect, so we're going to over direct all this hair. And same thing through this bottom area. Over direct and connect. Let's see how that looks. Are there any spots that stick out to me? Yeah, maybe a little bit through some of these areas. Don't quite feel as connected as I would like, so just go back and repeat. Now I'm going to take my last section. And this one is basically a vertical section just to connect everything for the front half of her head. Sometimes, depending on the haircut, I'll continue to go back, but you want to make sure that all the hair that you're pulling forward is hair that'll live on the forward half of her head. And that you're not accidentally cutting a bunch of layers on the back. So this is, again, that last section that we want to make nice and bold. It's looking pretty, pretty. So now what we can do is just check everything and make sure it's even. So what I like to do is find all the points on the head where it would be coming from and making sure that those are matching lengths. Typically I take about a ribbon vertical panel to double check everything. This is a little shorter over here, so let's go ahead and shorten this side. And another good way to see the front is to just section everything the same, meaning your east side and your west side are sectioned in the same spot. Just check out what's happening. Okay, so let's see. So I think what happened is we just carved a little bit more there. So I'm gonna just do the same thing right here. And we're gonna slice this out. So I wanna make this line more noticeable. inches. Come down a little. Now it's perfect. That is how you become a face frame expert.